Welcome to The Old World Lives, a Warhammer Fantasy Battles podcast. You can find us on Facebook at The Old World Lives, on Instagram at The Old World Lives, and you can reach us by email at theoldworldlives@gmail.com. And now, on to the episode. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of The Old World Lives, a Warhammer Fantasy podcast. My name is Christopher, and with me tonight I have Jimmy.
Hello, everyone.
This episode is going to be focused on a little pre-recorded segment I have later on. As we have said, we're a mainly 6th edition podcast, dabbling in the other editions. So we're going to talk about the differences between 6th and 8th edition and what the focuses on those both editions are. That's on later on in the podcast. Before that, we're going to do what we always do and have some hobby updates. So, Jimmy.
Well, I've been slowly painting my night goblins. It's going really, really slow, but I'm getting there. And mostly, I've been planning a Skaven underground gaming table for a skirmish campaign in Warhammer Skirmish. Ooh. And everything is based on basically Vermintide games. So yeah, that's what I'm working on right now with my brother, actually.
So what you're saying is that you and your brother have been playing way too much Vermintide.
Yes, that's about it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Nah, it's a great game. Every game set in the old world is fantastic games. Just look at all the old PC games like Shadow of the Horned Rat or Dark Omen. Yeah, really good games.
Or even up to Mark of Chaos, because it wasn't a bad game, just had to stand up to Total War of the time.
Yeah.
My hobby updates then. It's actually really been too hot in the hobby room, so I've been building stuff. I'm building a tower, but we're actually not going to discuss this right here because that's more focused on just rolling into this topic a bit later on. But before that, we have to mention when G-Dubs are doing something good, they're doing something good. And this weekend, the 11th of August, I'm going to open up like a made to order for the Warhammer Legends Dragons of the Old World.
Yeah, and those dragon models are fierce. They are the High Elf dragon with Imric, and then we have Malekith on his black dragon. And finally, we have the Twilight Sisters on the Forest Dragon, yeah?
Yeah, that's a lovely, lovely dragon.
Oh, yeah.
So
Fantastic details.
So if you're interested in elves and dragons, or just dragons, check these out August 11, because they might not be the style of the new stuff, but they're still really, really lovely classic models, and I am so tempted to complete my set.
I'm with you here. I really want to own all the 3 of those dragons. So we'll see if my budget will let me, but we'll know. We'll see.
So for a future episode, we are going to have basically dragon fights. They're going to be armies of dragons fighting dragons, eh?
We're going to fight the War of the Beard with real, true dragon princes riding dragons.
Maybe we should find someone with a large chaos army and recreate the Battle of Anarion and Kalidor versus the Chaos Horde.
I might know a guy, actually. I might just do so.
Ooh, that would be interesting. If you as a listener think that's interesting as well, please let us know, because then we could probably make it happen. So, since I mentioned the tower, because we're doing a really long-winded intro this time, I think.
Yeah.
More to discuss. We've been talking about a campaign and what we're going to do within the podcast. And this is the Border Prince campaign we mentioned before. We have had some progress on it, actually. Jimmy, why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, so in the Border Princess campaign we're going to play, we each roll out our territories that we're going to have. And every territory gives the player a bonus or unlocks something in the army for them to use, like magic users or more rare choices, more points, etc., etc. So we've been rolling up all these territories for each of us 5 players in the campaign. The list is the following. Niklas, with his Kislev, have a shrine and a village. Christopher, for his dwarfs, have a road and a wizard's tower. I wonder who lives there. And the other Christopher, or Krell, have a river and a forest for his undead. And Jens, with his Empire army, have a town and a village. And my Night Goblin, they have a sacred grove and some silver mines.
And I really have to take those mines back from you.
I'm never gonna let you do that. And to add to this, every player at the beginning of the campaign is going to choose another territory too. Let's see here. We're gonna go into what each territory does.
Let's start with the shrine then, because it's the first one, right?
Yes, the shrine unlocks battle standard bearers for the army. For each shrine you control, your army may include one battle standard bearer. An army may never have more than one battle standard, no matter how many shrines they control. And then they have a village. For each village you control, your army may include one extra special unit. So the Kislevs can use a battle standard bearer, and they have a third special choice, I think.
So isn't the only Kislev special choice the Griffin Legion, which you can have 0 to 1?
I think that's so.
No.
Well, yeah, it's a wasted thing.
On the other hand, it's only the beginning of the campaign because villages can be taken.
Yeah, territories may be lost and later found by other players. And you, Christopher, you have a road. It gives you 25 more points to represent that you can move troops more quickly to meet your enemies.
Yeah, which will probably result in 25 more shields on my dwarves.
Free
So-
shields are never wrong. And then you have a wizard's tower. So we're going to house rule this to let
Yeah.
you use a runesmith for this.
Yeah, because there is no
Yeah.
wizard available to my.
No,
Faction.
unless you want to field a Dogs of War wizard, but
It doesn't make sense
runesmiths
either
are
way,
cooler.
I think.
Yeah, runesmiths are cooler.
Yeah, and that's what we're gonna do because there will be a bit of fluff written for this anyway. It's really good to start it at the inception and then just move on with it.
Yeah.
And this is actually where my hobby progress was. Next to me, I have the little wizard tower I'm building, which is a squat little tower based on one of the artworks and later in-game resources from Warhammer Online Age of Reckoning, because I have a really, really nice dwarf tower in that game.
Fantastic architecture on every single building in that game, I must say.
And I really, really like that the artwork that's in the Age of Reckoning art book actually have a dwarf scale of reference, because next to the tower is how many dwarfs it's tall, which is perfect for recreating it.
Oh, Jesus. Well, it's accurate, though. Yeah.
Hopefully.
I'm gonna pile your dwarfs beside this just to see if you're true to the art.
Yeah. Well, it will be inspired by, but not true to the artwork, because I'm gonna do my own little flourish on it.
Yeah.
This would be a runesmith tower, which is situated somewhere on the edges of where we're playing. Pretty cool. So next up, we have a river.
Christopher has a river, and the land near the river is very rich and provides frequent and bountiful harvests. So the undead can harvest 25 more points for their army. Yeah, I see the zombies on the fields.
25 extra arms.
Yeah, and then they have a forest. The forest give them. They have supplies to make more war machines, and undead have so many war machines.
Well, there will just be a lot of black coaches then.
Yeah. Although both forests and mountains unlock skirmish units, so he can use ghouls.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And if we're probably going to sit down and talk about this a bit more, there might actually be other benefits for those. Just like me, that I can use a runesmith instead of a wizard. There might be some other benefits when you can't actually use the benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
It will be more fun that way when you start off the campaign. Maybe not later on in the campaign, because not every wizard tower can be a runesmith tower, but this one will be.
Exactly. So yeah, I might thinking he might have 25 or 20% off on coaches, maybe, because he has wooden zombies.
Yeah, let's set the wooden zombies. They're a bit stiff.
Yeah, and then we have my places. I have a sacred grove, and for each sacred grove, I can have one extra rare unit. So I'm gonna bring more doom divers. Ooh. And for my doom divers, I'm using the Forge World Goblobbers. So it's gonna be huge squigs, spitting squigs. Yeah, making sense.
I mean, why not? It's just cool.
Yeah. And then I have the silver mines. For each silver mine I control, I can take one magic item worth up to 50 points. So yeah, I'm not so hot on magic items though. We'll see.
But you can take regular items for 50 points if you want to. Just a spoon or something.
Yeah, 50 spoons. Oh yeah, I can eat soup spoons.
Yeah. There's one more. Since Jen's role, for the role for Jens, he got a village, because that one we've already covered.
Yeah.
And which is really good for the Empire army, because they have a lot of special troops. But they also
have a town. And for each town you control, you can include one extra character This character may not be a lord, but may be of any other type. And because the wizard's tower is the other thing that unlocks wizards, I read this as you can't have a wizard for your town. You can have any other kind of fighting hero. Like in his case, you can have
Town
a
priest.
town priest, yeah, and a captain. If you were using later editions, he could use a witch hunter or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of options there. You just
Yeah,
have to figure out exactly what's what.
yeah, exactly.
Do we have anything else for this before we move on?
The only thing we can reveal now is that this part of the campaign will use the, as we mentioned, the Border Princess campaign sets in from the rulebook in 6th edition, but it will be set in the Ostermark.
Mainly because Niklas wants to invade and expand Kislev.
Yeah, true. And most of us are doing snow bases on our armies, so it's gonna fit.
Yeah, and this is also set around the time of Storm of Chaos, not exactly when around the Storm of Chaos, but this is at this time quite lawless. Most of the government has fallen, and there's some opportunistic possibilities here. Just moving in, taking all the stuff, and leaving. And this also means that my first army won't be a Slayer cult. Because for one, I can't take a runesmith in that. I'm probably going to start off with doing a guild expedition force, which is one of those from the back of the Sixth Ed dwarf book.
I think it's gonna be swell. I love that kind of army.
Yeah, and it's just it would make sense that a small guild expedition just moves out, just checks whatever it is, try to collect the depth for all the black powder the humans once bought from them 350 years ago that they forgot to collect then. You know, the usual stuff.
Yeah, the Repo Men.
Well, the Repo Men with cannons as core units.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's all for theme and fun, this, so it will be really nice when we finally start rolling dice.
And also to mention for every listener, we aim to do this campaign at the Warhammer World. We're not sure if we can do it just yet, but that's our goal.
Yeah, if nothing else, we all, except for Niklas, live in about an hour and a half drive if we're gonna meet somewhere.
Yeah, we're gonna exclude those Kislev guys.
Yeah, he's got other fun people to play with, but since four of us live quite close, we'll probably rock up doing weekend of gaming sometime or a long day of gaming. But when that happens, we will make sure to let you know on Instagram, which is the same as the podcast name, and probably on Facebook as well, because we usually share it over.
Indeed.
Let's move on. We've got a short pre-recorded segment by Niklas and Krell, because we're going to start calling him that because it's way easier in the long run.
Yeah, he shall forever be known as Krell.
Yeah, we're trying to introduce other nicknames to him as well, but that's not for public.
We're gonna go in jail if we do that.
Yeah, but as we said, this is a pre-recorded segment, and if you have any thoughts on this segment or the short discussion me and Jimmy have afterwards, if you agree or disagree or got comments on it, send them in. Send them on Instagram, you can send them on Facebook, you can send them on the email address. We would love to hear what you're thinking. That makes it better for all of us, I think. As long as it's civil and not just, fuck you, you're doing it wrong.
Just don't use as many fucks as Niklas do. That would be rude.
If you're sensitive, don't listen to it or be advised. Well, on to the segment.
Hello and welcome to this segment of The Older Lives.
What is not die may not forever die, but only sleep. And we awoken.
Awoken by crazy nerds who have desires for good rules, good fluff.
But if you think about it, isn't all historical technical projects really driven by drunk, angry nerds wanting to make the world a better place? If you really think about it.
This is true. This is very true.
Yeah.
So in this segment, me and Christopher are the only ones here because the rest bailed on us.
I think, yeah, we should probably say the Orc and Goblin player actually had a real occupational hazard by having to keep his word and actually do what he said. So good on him.
And the other Christopher got wifed apparently. But it's fucking good to have a podcast with like at least 4 people that when people bail, it's just, all right, whatever, we're still 2 people and that's enough to do a podcast.
Yeah, I think redundancy is really the key there. Plus, we all bring different things. You bring competency, and I bring someone for you to talk to, which you know is important in its own way.
Well, you do have a nice voice for radio, I gotta say that. And in your own words, a face for radio. I
do have a face for radio. I just want to say that today I went on a rant visiting my wife's friends, and they said like, oh, we're such nerds. We watch Game of Thrones. And I might and might not have schooled these like 3 18-year-old men and women on how they were not nerds, how they did not understand a book. Then I went into the difference between the Game of Thrones show and the Song of Ice and Fire, and then I rounded it up by just heckling them and telling them about Tolkien for 25 minutes while drinking a beer. Apparently, 2 13-year-olds sitting behind me were laughing nonstop, so
Yes, I am proud
that's
of
my
you.
demographic.
I am proud of you.
Thanks. Core demographic, angry teenagers.
All right,
It is
so
what we
in
are.
this segment, we're going to be talking about the differences between 6th and 8th edition of Warhammer Fantasy.
And why are we talking about that, Nicholas?
We are doing this because these seem to be like, because fantasy is that system, but now that we started to play it again, you can kind of pick whichever system you want, which rule version you want to play. I mean, since there's no official one, they are official, but they're old. There's no standard one. We can choose whichever we think fits our purpose best. These two rule systems differ quite a bit and serve different purposes. It seems like these are the two fantasy players seem to pick between.
Yeah, and I think I'm not as experienced as you or Jimmy or Chris, so I basically asked you, Fluff Wife, what's the difference between 6th to 8th edition? And I think it was you or Jimmy said it very well with saying that in 6th edition it's very low fantasy, it's gritty, it's gothic, there's still a lot of horror permeating the old world. And like you said just before we started recording, magic was a rare occurrence that most people middling about their lives in the Empire rarely saw, even if they heard about it.
Yeah.
And in the 8th edition, it seems to be more like high fantasy. You have this commonly recurring heroes, magical swords up the wazoo. Everybody's heroic in their Mian, and the bad guys very clearly evil. In the 6th edition, it's kind of grayish. I mean, take the undead, which I do. Some of them are vampires, but some of them are more humanized monsters that do it because they want to test humanity and transcend humanity. In the 8th edition, vampire counts, I mean, it's fun to read, but they are basically Superman goes vampire that rules with an iron fist because they can. Some of them for good reasons, but you can't get away from the fact that they do.
Yeah. And if we go into like the differences, if we would start, 6th edition is kind of solidified the fantasy universe that Game Workshop made since the 80s when their first edition came. And then they've been building on these stories. And it feels like 6th edition was the first time that they really, it's like the old world, at least as I remember it from being a kid. Because I didn't really play 6th edition, but I was collecting a lot at that time because didn't really speak English that well when I was 12 or something. But I was an avid collector and I fucking loved going through the books and just looking at the pictures and the bits of fluff that I understood. And 6th edition was a lot more gritty and small scale and like about this band of warriors going to a battlefield and having the heart of evil.
Yeah, and I mean, it really becomes tangent when once you compare like Empire 6th edition to Vampire Count 6th edition to Orcs and Goblins. Each book is very solidly written, just fluff-wise at least, from the perspective of your race. If you just compare like the Empire to the Skaven book, it's very clear that both of them speak of the same sort of events, sometimes in the same fluff segment, just a battle from different views, yet from their own part of the story. So I played in 6th edition. I had a Vampire Accounts book, and like the first couple of pages, when you get past the index, it's basically like horrid accounts of people encountering vampires in different situations. It's the same in Orc and Goblins, which I checked out, and the Empire, which Jimmy recommended. It's very vague. It's very driven from the first-person narrative. It's from the view of the Empire, so the Empire doesn't have an X-ray vision to understand the motivations of Chaos or Skaven. It's just basically, oh shit, I fought against this huge-ass ratman, and now the authorities are telling me it's some kind of Chaos spawn. I know what I saw, and then that guy gets shanked by an Eshin. Or like the rats are just like, we're doing this because it is. We're not sure where we came from, but this is what we do. It's like a journal written. It's a piece of fluff you got straight from the universe. And I'm looking at the 6th edition codex right here that me and Niklas picked up during Lincoln. And some of them are just like, they've made it as if parchment of torn out pages from Witch Hunter's manual. And one of them's like, hold ye proudly the symbol of Sigmar. It will banish all vampires. And just next to it, you can't read what it says because it's blotted out by drawn out blood and just a torn off hand of Priest of Sigmar and the ring torn straight off the finger. And I mean, it's just great. It's fun to read and it really gives you a fluff and narrative. I mean, you're checking out 2 armies right now. Is it the same for you? I haven't checked out Chaos Dwarf, so...
Yeah, the thing is, like, Chaos Dwarfs that I'm collecting now was made in 8th edition, but it was a Forge book made by Alan Bly, and he really had, like, more of a 6th edition feel to the whole book. Like, it's more of a... he said in, like, an interview that the book is more, like, had the feel of an artifact from the old world than an army book. And that's kind of what it feels reading those old books from 6th edition. And 6th edition in general is more about a narrative, and it was more like let's build a narrative first and models, and then whip out some rules for them, and not like how can we make the next book better rules wise, and let's make some models for it, which I feel it was more like.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed this briefly, and we'll get back around to it like when we circle around. We've planned this out somewhat, but in 8th edition, it seems that Games Workshop were very much aware that they need to do something commercially to make sure people expanded their fantasy armies. So they took very solid measures to make sure both to expand the core choices, but also to buy big ass kits. I don't mind the big ass kits. I think some of them are very solid, and like stuff like the Terrorgeist and the Mortis engine and the Coven Throne, they look really cool, and they really have that centerpiece feel that you don't really get in fantasy otherwise. But in some instances, it's very clear how they're pushing stuff to the front, like how suddenly big models did stuff that we never even heard about before, and they pass it off as being integral to the core. In 6th edition, when they introduced completely new vampire count stuff, it was basically like, yeah, well, then you have this thing which we've spoken about, but it's basically a super vampire soldier that we put a soul into. And I buy that. But in 8th edition, you have like, oh yes, and obviously all necromancers aspire to possess a Mortis engine. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that if all necromancers had a huge ass throne surrounded by ghastly spirits haunting all who laid visage upon his horrible persona, we would have heard about it until now.
Yeah, this thing like what I was saying before, that they're the same game, but they're not really the same game. 8th edition is more about fucking epic clashes of armies. And as I said, they're two different kind of things, and some people like one or the other. I fucking love both, to be honest. I think like huge armies are cool, just clashing into each other. It's fucking mayhem and big monsters. But then sometimes I just want to have like a skirmish fight in fucking Empire forests where you just have small units battling around.
No, I agree
It's just
completely.
two different things.
And I mean, in 6th edition, you could have things like 2,000 points. Since they reduced the points of pretty much every individual model, you could have huge blocks of undead or huge blocks of dwarves clashing with undead hordes, or you could have Skaven clashing into elves. But you could have these huge battles, which are really cool, which is obviously what you imagine. And if you've ever played the Total War Warhammer fantasy game, then you know what I'm talking about. You can have like 2,000 men rushing into each other. You really get the epic feel of a huge battle. And 6th edition was very much an intimate affair, like you just said. But also in 6th edition, you were sort of liberated from the basic core book. Because again, if you look into all the books, and this is continued in Storms of Chaos, you get like, oh, you just want to play with Slayers? Here's a Slayers cult army. Or, okay, you have vampire counts. Do you want to have like a Lamia vampire, the female seductress one, who just has a bunch of seduced swains fighting for her? Then bring them in. Use whatever empire army you want. Or you can have like a ghoul court. They weren't as stringent with what kind of army you could build. But there, just as in Horus Heresy, it says you have to have the permission from your opponent to use this.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, like the entire philosophy of Games Workshop during that time, that they were less strict about what was actually balanced, but they just added a bunch of flavor. And this is the same when you look at the same era of 40k, Imperial Guard, and they had doctrines, you could flavor them a bunch. And then afterwards, they kind of streamlined it, made everything kind of the same, but it was more balanced as a game. But people seem more gamey after that as well, so I don't really know if that was a good idea or not. But like in 6th edition fantasy, you have a bunch of different army lists for each army list. And like at the back of the army is like, yeah, well, this is just the core army, but if you want to play the special army, then there were not just in Storm of Chaos where you had a bunch of specialist armies you could play from, but in the back of each army book they had like, oh, you want to play with a bunch of cannons for the Empire? Well, here's the known cannon train or whatever. And do you want to play a knightly order? Well, use knights as core, and these limitations apply. So it's more, you could do some more flavorful stuff. And I love that, like they said in the back of like Fire, that you can have these magic items. They have the same rules, but you have to name them differently because they're not the same thing, which is awesome. Like they told you, like you have to name it differently. You have to change the fluff with this to be able to play with it.
Yeah, and I mean, it just demands something of the player. Maybe that doesn't really mesh well if you're a new player, you want to get into it. Maybe that does sort of terrify new players, which I can respect as a commercial decision from Games Workshop. But I mean, you have to name your characters sometimes. And like you said, oh, you want to play a Middenheim army? Well, obviously they wouldn't roll out a bunch of cannons. Try this. It puts not a pressure, but it puts a demand on the player to be innovative and actually put some real genuine effort into it. And I think, I don't know, like you said about being gamey, back in the day, if I ever played like a rando, like I'm going to call him Rando Calrissian at like the local game club, I don't think anyone ever went, oh, that conversion is shit. Or like, well, the Middenheim army should never be like that. We were like, what did you do? Oh, that's cool. I like that conversion. And maybe it has to do with the fact that we're younger, but at the same time, I can also remember younger people, like teenagers, being unrelentlessly angry at a bunch of stuff. So I don't think so. I mean, I think we just appreciated effort. And also, maybe to be fair, back then we didn't have as much internet access as we do today. So whenever you saw a conversion, you thought that was really the king shit. Someone sat down and took apart 2 different kits and did that. And I mean, you always appreciate effort.
Should we go and look at the differences between them, like rules-wise?
Yeah, let's.
Rules. So the main differences between the systems that I would say, like the biggest thing I would say is actually charge distance. Because in 6th edition and later 7th edition, we'll go into that later, you charge twice your movement, and that's it. Always twice your movement. And also you couldn't pre-measure. So you kind of had to stand across from the enemy and say like, is that really 12 inches away? I don't know, I'm just gonna fucking have to go for it. And then you measure and no, it's 11 inches. And then you just walk forward your normal move 6 inches, you're fucked. Or you make it in and then you swing first. That's another thing. You always swung first when you charge, like they brought back in Age of Sigmar.
Unless you faced a model that had it always strikes first.
Fucking hiles. Yeah, that's the way you charge. And then the other like biggest thing I would say, because I collected dwarves before, is that artillery is guess range. I fucking missed that they took it away when they had like you could pre-measure. In this game, it works in a different way. I love that they brought it in 40k. But anyway, in 6th edition fantasy, you had to guess where you were aiming your cannon. Or you aimed it and then you set a range. And that's how far the cannonball flew. And then you rolled additional distance and then rolled a bounce. I fucking love that. That's so cool. That it really feels like you're actually in the battle when you have to guess your artillery range.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it worked during the Napoleons. You fired your cannon, and then you had a looking glass and 2 guys who adjusted the screws. And then you adjusted it again.
Yeah.
And just like in the game, the dwarves were better at estimating ranges. But it was supposed to be a bit of guesswork. Unless you had
it like when you draw up the battlefield and then you draw the different units from the enemy and then they move closer and then you like check when they move, like, they moved 11 inches. Okay, and he looks like he's 17 inches from the side and minus 11. I'll just use Pythagoras and he's that far away. Okay, I'll aim right here. And the person across is like, what the fuck? Are you using math? Yeah, fuck you.
Yeah, see, and I think that's pretty unfair because I went to a pretty substandard middle school, which means that obviously I'm at a strong disadvantage. But then again, I did choose undead. So yeah.
No artillery. They didn't have any artillery, right?
No, they have nothing. They don't even have shooting.
Yeah.
In 6th edition, I had one item that allowed me to shoot poisonous snakes that came back to life in air. And how cool isn't that? It's literally what it is. And it's like,
amazing.
I can shoot at a character in a unit and I do two wounds. And you get no armor saves. And I think it says because the snakes crawl into your armor. And come on, that's just the fucking best thing ever.
Yeah, there's so much flavor and just some very dark humor in 6th edition.
Yeah, and another thing we should probably mention is that pivoting and twisting and turning works differently in 6th edition.
Yeah.
I think they streamlined that in 8th edition as well, because now you could move straight backwards or sideways at half your range. In 6th edition, you'll have to refresh my memory. You had to actually turn and then move, right?
I don't know how it worked moving backwards and sideways. I don't really know about that.
I never did that either in 6th edition. But if I remember correctly, I think you had to turn fully and then move. But there was very clear rules for what that actually meant when you pivoted. But it also meant that if you moved backwards, you showed your rear to the enemy. In 8th edition, I could just face you and, I don't know what, like take a goose step backwards or something.
Another thing, difference 7th and 6th and 8th. Units block line of sight. So it's not true line of sight all the time as it is in 8th. If you have a block of infantry, then they block line of sight to the block of infantry behind them. Because you can't see them at all. You can't target them for shooting or magic or whatever.
Yeah, and another thing we should probably bring up right now is, and we had to check with Jimmy before we started, to constitute a rank in 6th edition, you didn't have a set number of models, did you? Was
No,
it like
you did 4.
Oh yeah, and in
They
8th edition,
changed it. Yeah, they changed it from 6th to 7th edition that you have to be 5 wide. Another thing that is more of an 8th edition thing is horde formation. That if you're 10 models wide, then you can attack with an extra rank.
Yeah.
And also in 8th in general, the second rank can attack in close combat, and the second rank can shoot through the first rank, which they can't in 6th. In 6th, you had to be on a hill to be able to shoot with 2 rank.
yeah, and something that's super important because I spoke to a bunch of people who want to get in fantasy, and they had to explain why it was such a huge game changer. But there's also the very important steadfast,
Yes.
which works exactly like stubborn in Warhammer 40k. Basically,
Yeah.
if I have more ranks than Niklas, I take all my leadership tests on unmodified leadership, which is huge because
it's very big for Horde armies. And
Oh, yeah.
a lot of people played Horde armies in it.
yeah, because there's a direct incentivization to do it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm a skeleton. I have leadership 2. I give fuck all. But if I roll up something like a white, which has a leadership 7, everything I roll over my leadership, I lose models. So if I have unmodified leadership, that's huge to me.
So
8 and
you
a 2d6.
You guys can
Badass.
see how this game favors more big formations and just more models in 8th edition. Because there are rules that just give you benefits from it, straight up. Because in 6th, if you had like a huge block of goblins, then they could just hold out forever. I mean, in 6th edition, they could flee, but in 8th, they could hold out. So 6th edition, if you got charged by cavalry and you lose by like 3 or something, then you might lose the entire block and you can't really do anything about it. You only
Yeah,
got like +1 modifier for outnumbering the enemy, and you just get +3 maximum for ranks. Then the rest will just die. So you had to play with like more smaller units in 6th.
And I mean, Jimmy's going to stab me for this, and I'm very sorry about it, Jimmy, but you're going to stab me anyway because you're a badass goblin player. But I'm not sure if it's 6th to 7th or 7th to 8th when they added a free reform. If I charged you and wiped you out, I think in 8th edition I got a free reform, which is pretty big.
Yeah.
And I also got is it called Massacre Assault? If
What
I
happens then?
defeat you in the first turn, I get to move on and charge again, don't I? Or am I thinking wrong here?
No, I don't think so. Only if the enemy is just straight behind. If you move into a line against the enemy, then you charge it.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, you're right. In 8th edition, you could, after close combat, then you could reform, just face a new way, which is huge, as you said. Because in 8th edition, you either moved on in a straight line after the enemy, or you stood still. Those are the only 2 things you could do. You couldn't just move around.
Yeah, and I mean, we spoke about it briefly before, but a monstrous creature like a dragon or a terrorgeist or a chimera or anything that's a monstrous unit was, as a rule, better. I checked out the rules, but it seems like it's a lot better at killing units in 8th edition because you can strike more and you have the Thunder Stomp rule, a bit like a Nightly Stomp attack. I'm sorry, that's my closest reference from Warhammer Heresy.
Automatic hits, basically.
Yeah, but there's also a downside to that because if I charge into your, I'm sorry, what are those badass dwarf guys called?
The Chaos Dwarfs.
Yeah.
What's your point? If you charge into those guys?
Yeah, if I charge in like your evil dwarfs and I can attack several lines and then I get to thunderstomp them, but we say that I win combat by 5 models, you still have more ranks.
Yeah.
So you're steadfast. So sure, I can kill you faster, but I can't overrun you to the same extent, which meant that you had to be a bit more tactical, but there's also a huge incentivization to bring a huge model.
Yeah, everything was bigger in 8th edition. How you can summarize it easily. So the reason, though, that you guys, because like when I got on board with this, I was mostly thinking of playing 8th edition with Chaos Wars, because that's when their army came up in Tamarkan. But like, so like mostly Jimmy, he's like an adamant fan of 6th edition, and so is Jens and Christopher, and you as well with the Vampire Count book, because like the fluff was just better and it was more fun to build an army, and it's a huge deal in just building an army project. Like you're supposed to have fun with building it, because there's no fucking point.
I mean, we came into this to have fun with a game system that we thought were balanced and we were excited to work with.
And that's the thing. Like in 6th edition, it feels more like a labor of love, that you have like a character to your army, and the armies are fucking cool. Well, in 8th, it's more of a project that like you kind of have to have a bunch of models to be able to play it. And from what I've heard, that's kind of the whole problem with fantasy, that it wasn't profitable in the end, because they were just like making it bigger and bigger for each edition. And then at the end of it, like in 8th edition or the end times, it's like, yeah, well, I need a fucking 3,000 point army. It's like 150 models or something just to be able to play this game. So no one could really get into it.
They did a good job of supersizing everything. Like, did you ever want to see the entire elf race reunified? Well, here's your chance. You can also play with Malekith as the great leader of all the elves, which is obviously, I'm pro Malekith, I should probably tell you. He's a good guy, he did nothing wrong, he was cheated out his throne and he's back for revenge. You can do that, but you need to bring Malekith. And you want to bring Malekith, you have to have a minimum of, I think, 3 high elf units, 2 dark elves, and wood elf units. It's the same for everything. Yeah, you want to go crazy with Chaos Skaven? Do it.
Whole end time fluff is like special thing. When I say if I'm gonna play in like the old world, I would never think of like playing the end time stuff. That's like, I could do that as a special campaign thing with some friends and just have like fucking epic events. But that's not really the old world to me.
No, and I mean, that's also something we discussed. I thought it was to me, this is a great boon because now that we play Warhammer Fantasy Battles, we don't really have to get hung up on what's next step. What are they going to do next with the army books? Where is the fluff moving?
Yeah.
Now we have our own sort of role-playing world where the changes that we make to it as players are tangible and continuous.
Yeah.
We don't have to think about, okay, but this happens in the fluff in the next book. No, what we do affects the world as it is, which also ties into the games that we're going to play as Border Princes, because basically each and every one of us has an equal chance of establishing a local warlord and then draw upon the fluff and resources, which means, I mean, as a game leader, that excites me. Is that a good word? Yeah, I'm going to use excites me. That means that now the world is truly ours.
That's a thing. I was more come to the terms with the whole Age of Sigmar thing, that they blew up the old world, because now that they've destroyed the old world, or I mean left it alone, kind of, they can't really fuck with it anymore. They can't just bring in crazy shit into the fluff that I would feel doesn't belong there. Now I can just go back to the old editions and enjoy all of the stuff that I enjoyed before. And I feel like I haven't explored it. Like I haven't played it enough, or I haven't read enough books to be done with it. I mean, there's still so much left there. So many novels and so many like battles that could be fought that I've never fought. So I'm just fucking happy to go there and play it again.
Yeah, and there's actually something we didn't bring up, which is super important. I mean, I get that you don't think it's important, Niklas. That's cool. All your magic is driven by sacrificing the unbelieving into, like, I don't know, a magma plate, which I respect. I mean, it's cool. I'll steal that. I mean, borrow it. But Magic in 8th edition was a very different affair from Magic
Yes.
in 6th edition. Magic in 6th edition was, if I remember clearly, you got a power dice for every wizard's power level, right? Like if I had two four level wizards, I got 8 dice straight up.
Yeah, +2. You always start with 2.
Yeah, +2. In 8th edition, you roll 2 dices, and if I'm having my magic phase and I roll a 6 and a 2, I get 8 dices. Niklas will get the highest dice, which is 6.
Yeah.
Then I roll a dice for every wizard I have on the field, and if I get a 6, I get another channel, and then he does the same for dispelling.
Magic in 6th was a lot more, you could count on it more. You had the same amount of dice each turn, and the opponent didn't really have a lot of dice to dispel shit with.
Yeah.
It's more like, it was safer to cast magic. Like you knew you were going to get your spells off.
And I mean, there's a reason why people who played Warhammer 40k, 7th edition and 6th edition started calling the psychic phase the magic phase, because that's what it was now. You roll a d6, oh, this is my warp charges, plus the cycle level of everything, which with some armies, Grey Knights and Eldar, got a bit crazy. But in Warhammer Fantasy, I think that's actually one of the things that are pretty good with Warhammer 8th edition. They explained it as, it was the fickle winds of magic. The storms of magic are not with you. And that's basically because all the poles and the vortexes around the world are not blowing your way, which makes sense in a fantasy setting. Unfortunately, sometimes that got a bit crazy. Like Chris is playing a dwarf army and he rolls 2 d6s. Okay, cool. He got 12 dices. Oh, I'm a badass necromancer. I got 6 dices. And it should also be said that they streamlined a lot about how magic worked. I'm not gonna drag up that bone right here, but magical missiles got a lot better. And they now had a lot more streamlined magics, and you could power boost them. You could roll on like 6, 8, or 10 dice, which might have been added in 7th edition, but I mostly see it in 8th edition.
There were some crazier spells as well in 8th edition, like unit destroying spells.
Yeah, I mean, just for vampire counts, they have a spell called the Curse of Aging. And basically, I rolled to make magic on one of your units, and on the first turn, it remains in effect, and that was new for 7th edition, I'm pretty sure about that. It remained in play, and you could try and dispel it every turn, but the first turn it's in effect, you roll a d6 for every guy in your unit, and every 6, he dies immediately. No armor saves. Oh no, it gets better. On the second turn it's in effect, it's a 5 for every dude in that unit, and then a 4.
And there were several spells of that used like instantly kill stuff.
I think you might know about it, but Tamurkan's Purple Sun is probably one of the best examples, because I think that's pretty much like a vortex, isn't it?
Yeah, so you place a large blast and you take an initiative test. If you fail, you die.
And that one, did it remain in play? I don't remember. Or
Yeah,
did
it
it just
did.
like move around?
Yeah, it did.
You had one guy in your army who he had it like a sealed spell, right? He didn't even have to cast it.
Oh wait, maybe that wasn't actually initiative. I think that was Pit of Shades. It was initiative test or he died. That was something else, and then you died. And then there was also Lori Metal, Final Transfiguration or whatever.
Is that when
Transformation.
I turned into gold?
Yeah, and it's fucking. I don't know if it was 5 or 6s. Maybe it was 5s, and then 6s on several wound characters or something. And then they used to fucking die. Some crazy stuff.
I've had a couple of beers and I've been arguing with teenagers and 20-year-olds about high magic as opposed to low magic, but without boring people, think of it like this. It's like basically Game of Thrones, where magic is debunked and people talk shit about it, and then somebody comes in and lights someone on fire and suddenly fucking dragons, as opposed to say, I mean, like Camelot. Merlin's around, he throws fireballs, the one true king has a magic sword, people have magic swords, it's not super strange, they go on incredible quests and they have high oaths of magic.
Yeah.
There's more of that in 8th edition and the later editions. Heroes arose. In 6th edition, it was a bit more cynical. Again, in vampire accounts, they have an account of a great hero stepping up to a blood dragon and just getting trounced. Like he gets his collarbone and rib shattered. And it's like this great knight from Bretonia. And afterward, he lies around thinking about how he was heinously defeated and how we can learn from this and become better. I don't remember if there's any other book where like people are just straight up killed or murdered in the first parts of the army book.
And yeah, like those are the major changes that we went through right now. Like magic is big, pre-measuring, fixed charge distances, blocking line of sight.
Yeah, there's one thing more I want to mention: fear. Psychology as a whole got a lot less important in 8th edition because before fear could basically paralyze your unit. Now it's just in the fighting subphase, it could retract attacks from you. It made you shittier. Terror also got a bit of a downgrade, but it's still pretty good.
And then, of course, there are a lot of small changes.
Oh, definitely.
Lapping around in 6th edition, like if you want to combat, you could take your rear line and put them around the enemy unit. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Light cavalry got changed a bit, and also is Vanguard doesn't exist in 6th. It goes to 7th. So that's like scout move in Old 40k and Heresy that you can move before the battle begins. That exists in 8th, but not in 6th. Light cavalry changed a bit because I'm looking into light cavalry.
Why are you doing that?
Oh, you'll find out.
Chaos Dwarfs have that?
So when you move, they can fire when they march. It's pretty cool. In 6th edition, though, they could fire in any way. So you could fire to the side and rear, so you didn't have to place them anywhere. But you could rotate them as much as you wanted anyway, in both 6th and 8th. In 6th, they don't get rank bonuses, which they do in 8th, which lends itself to 8th in general with the whole bigger units thing. So you can actually use bigger units of light cavalry in 8th because you can use their ranks when you fight. I think that was it, like Vanguard and ranks.
Yeah, and I mean, to me personally, I would play. I know Jimmy disagrees with this, and he is the expert. I'm not going to foam on that in any way. Looking at the rule set now, I would rather play 8th edition than 7th edition because it seems to me that an 7th. I mean, I'd play 6th, but going from like up to 8th, there's a lot of things that they sort of fixed for every army. They expanded on the rules books. They added options for different ways of playing. But in 8th edition, it was the sense that they were coming to a head, and they did improve a lot of things. It's a bit too high fancy for me, and I do prefer the intimacy of 6th edition, but there's nothing wrong with 8th edition. This is a personal choice from us as players, and we will probably play 8th edition as well. A good way to do this would be to have like one 8th edition army and one 6th edition army.
Yeah, I've started, because my case dwarfs were an 8th edition book. I started with those, and the people I'm talking with before, they're playing 8th edition. It's like, yeah, I'll play this 8th edition. And then you guys were like, yeah, well, we don't play 6th edition. And then at first we were like, yeah, well, I guess I could use the 8th edition book and just play them in 6th edition. But it always feels kind of wrong and it doesn't really feel like they belong there. And then I thought, like, yeah, I could use their Ravening Hordes because the Chaos Hordes are in there as well. But it kind of feels like proxying of it. Like, yeah, I could use these units as this thing. It's not really what they are because they have like, this awesome fluff in 8th edition. So it always felt kind of wrong. And then I was looking at like some books. I was looking at Chaos, like Wars of Chaos. But then it felt like, because I've been looking at the 8th edition Wars of Chaos as well. So 6th edition just kind of felt like it was the same thing, but less options or not as cool as 8th. So I kind of wanted an army that is pure 6th edition. So that's when I went with Kislev.
And it's
the
just
ultimate.
badass.
So yeah, that's the army I got for 6th edition. And like I've been thinking like if I would use them in 8th edition, but you can use them, but you would have to kind of change the playstyles a bit, just depending, and to change the units, how you form them is depending on edition. Also, this is a very limited army. Like the army list only has like 6 units, including 2 named characters. Kind of works, but since we're gonna play like a 1,000 points campaign in 6th edition, I think it's gonna be perfect.
Yeah, I mean, that's 6th edition. Do you know what my special choices are for Vampire counts? No, the rare choices. It's the Black Coach and the Dogs of War. That's all it says. It's like a page. Rare choices for the Vampire counts. Black Coach and Dogs of War. Yeah, I mean, that's the way it was.
Yeah.
And in 8th edition, I think I have like 6 choices, which is good. You have some variety and choices in there, but
Yeah, also another
Alas.
big difference between the editions is that in 6th edition, you had like a number of units you had to take minimum and maximum. In 8th edition, you have percentage.
yeah, which again ties into the fact that just because you can do math and put on 2 shoes that are of the same color, you get a clear advantage. My ability to like dig coal early in the morning is not factored into Warhammer at all, which is a gross injustice of cosmic scales.
So yeah, those are 2 different systems. I don't know which I think I like more. This kind of changes army building a bit, but that's another big difference in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, like we're trying to get across here, they're both valid systems. There's nothing wrong with them inherently. Just we prefer the one over the other. And if you and your friends are somewhere out there playing one of the systems over the other, we'd love to hear from you, obviously.
Yeah.
We want to hear your experiences and share the game with people around the world.
Yeah, so send us messages if you play fantasy. If we would just fucking cap this up, it's 6th edition favors more fluffy small battles, and 8th edition is just grand fantasy regimental battle.
No, I think that's that. Do you have anything to add, Niklas?
No, I think it's been a good discussion. I hope we made it clear some of the differences, at least between the editions.
Yeah.
They're kind of like 2 different games of the same game, but I fucking love both of them.
Yeah, and I mean, something that Jimmy showed us, just to like close it off my behalf, I found some cool stuff in the 8th edition sculpts, like the Terrorgeist, which I keep ragging on about, and like the Vargeist and the Vargulf that I really want to play in 6th edition. And we have Jimmy, who's played Warhammer Fantasy and still plays it, and he has a tremendous amount of experience. He looked over the rules, and basically, it's not terribly hard to just adapt the retrofit back to 6th edition.
Or you just have to fucking play 8th edition with me.
Well, sure. I mean, last week I painted up 40 skeletons. I feel good to go.
So yeah, I think this is it for this segment. All right.
Yep.
So after break.
And that was Niklas and Krell talking about their views on 6 versus 8. And me and Jimmy's going to talk a bit about that as well, because we're going to talk about what they just talked about. Jimmy, start us off.
Well, I really think they summed up what I do remember from comparing both editions without having to read both rule sets, just to jog my memory. So I think they made a relatively fair comparison, although it did lean more towards the favor of 6th edition than 8th edition. But that might be because me myself is drawn more towards 6th edition, so I might have listened more to their 6th edition things.
I think we all have a slight bias to 6th edition, and the reason Jimmy started off this, that I have not played a game of 8th edition, so I can't really comment on the rules. I can only say that I really, really liked 6th edition. So that's all I can say.
Yeah, because from an army book perspective, 6th edition is more grim in the setting than 8th is. As 8th edition have more heroes, more great ferocious monsters, and this is an occurring theme in 8th edition rather than 6th. So if you do like heroic things and big heroic deeds and great monsters and great epic battles, 8th edition is your game. If you want the more grim kind of game, 6th is your
Suffering
game.
peasants, invading army.
Yeah, everyone sitting a pile of mud and splashing their hands down. Yay! Yay, I'm alive!
I only lost 1 foot today, and it wasn't even mine. Yeah, but there's more difference than just the rules. That we're trying to say. There is also a difference in the tone and how the world is conveyed.
Yeah, exactly. And like I mentioned earlier too, monsters, as they are more occurring in 8th edition rather than 6th, they are all it is because they are better in 8th edition at dishing out damage compared to prior editions. And that's why they are more common in the game. Like Krell mentioned, they didn't kill units by winning combats alone, as what they're facing often are stubborn due to steadfast. So they needed other units to babysit them to win a combat.
I think of seeing Bloodthirsters facing off against Notling swarms.
Yeah, and the Snotlings will not run away from peasants.
Yeah.
Fighting a great demon, and they're not even afraid of it. There's like killing scores and scores of peasants, but they will never run away.
But that's also because we will never run out of peasants
That's true.
until we do.
I think the game would end before they would kill all the peasants. Thunderstomp may be
Yeah.
a great special rule, but it's not that good.
So is that what happened to Britannia after 6th edition?
Yeah,
They ran
got
out of peasants.
Yes, they did.
As I've said, I don't really know much about 8th edition. I just know that 6th edition was the style of play I preferred and the setting I preferred, which I've already mentioned. And that's also because there wasn't that much hope for grandiose, large monsters, large, powerful heroes. It was the troops, it was the war machines that actually mattered.
Yeah. And like they mentioned, Magic wasn't as good in 6th edition as it was in 8th edition. And as 8th edition had their great destructive spells in the game. And if you got that spell, it could be a big game change. Positive thing in this part is that you can only have one of each spell in the army, or rather one. I think that's how it was, or that you can only cast it once per turn in the army as a whole.
Mm-hmm. What we're saying is we can't really say which one of these you should choose to play. This is what we like, which is 6th edition. There's also good stuff from 8th edition. We're not anything bad about that. It's just which setting you want to play in and which playstyle you want to play is up to you. And I think you could as easily just use the rules and settings from whichever version you want if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say this. Krell mentioned that I would kill him for him mentioning this. He said that I would kill him for him for him rather playing 8th edition than 7th edition, but I won't. I would also rather play 8th edition rather than 7th edition.
Yeah,
and
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
7th was when my interest at that time started to peter off.
Like I said earlier, I may prefer 6th edition, but I would play 8th edition without any problems as long as I don't play a douchebag.
Yeah, the person you're playing is probably more important than actually what version of the game, at least when it comes to these 3 ones.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a bit bigger difference 1st to 5th edition as well.
Yeah. Also, one thing they mentioned that I think is a great thing, there is no worry about the next book that will come and how it will affect our armies. Niklas also pointed out that there won't be any changes to the lore and there won't be any new factions, so this is our world now.
Yeah, and even though we would probably all really like more fiction set in the old world, because it's a really nice setting.
Yeah, it truly is.
So that's probably it for this time. We're just gonna probably mention what we're gonna do next time, and that is our first edition of our little book club. We're gonna read a book that we have already mentioned on Instagram, which is Riders of the Dead.
Yeah, and I am probably the only one in the group that haven't started reading it, but I'm starting in a few days, and I am sure I'm gonna love it.
Yeah, we've got a week or a week and a half until we record next time, so
Yeah,
we'll have some time.
plenty of time.
And tying into this, we're actually going to have our next army focus, and that is Niklas, and he's going to talk all about his Kislev and why he loves them.
All right.
And we're probably going to have some updates on our campaign as well. Maybe we've actually decided exactly where it's set, and maybe we have started on like an army list per person or something.
Yeah, hopefully everyone can give a hint of what they're gonna use in their armies.
Dwarves, that's my hint.
Only dwarfs, enough said.
And cannons. Dwarves and cannons.
Goblins and squigs, enough said.
Fair enough. I'm gonna take a punt at rattling bones and dudes on horses for other people.
Yeah.
That's it for today. Got any comments on what you heard? Maybe you have some thoughts or input, send our way, and we'll get back to you.
So tune in next time, and until then, take care, everyone.
Take care.
Time have ended, and the realm of elf, dwarf, and man shattered. But in our hearts, the old world liveth.